A long-time Central Australian with strong ties to several remote Indigenous communities has written to a participant in the John Pilger film Utopia and raised his concerns about inaccuracies in the film. David Hewitt has been working at Mutijulu community on and off since it was created. He says the film glosses over many issues. He says he's written to respected anthropologist John Altman from the Australian National University, who appeared in the film. He also questions whether John Pilger spent enough time here in Central Australia. Now, filmmaker John Pilger was defensive when questioned on ABC Local Radio about that.
I've made 4 films over 30 years. I've probably been to more communities in and around the Northern Territories than many of my colleagues. I can't tell you in actual days, weeks and months that I've spent, but it's been a very long time. I don't believe a journalist and filmmaker should parachute in, as it were, into situations. I think they should look at it over a period of time.
John Pilger speaking on ABC Local Radio ahead of the screening of his film Utopia at Alice Springs a few weeks ago. David Hewitt, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Nadine.
What were your first impressions of the film Utopia?
My wife and I were just so disappointed that he didn't recognise what was being done in Central Australia. But we've got some wonderful people and organisations in town that have done some great work over the last 20 or 30 years. Just groups like CALIS, the Purple House, Central Australian Aboriginal Congress, the Shire Youth Workers, Art Centres, NPY Women's Council, Anglicare and Pink River Mission, Yiperinya School, that have done great work, but not one of these organisations was mentioned in the film.
What is it about this film that does concern you the most?
It's not entirely accurate. His reporting on Mutijulu community wasn't accurate.
In what way? In what way?
It's about the starvation amongst children and the fact that they didn't have enough money to buy fruit and vegetables. Mutijulu would be one of the wealthier communities around Central Australia. The people there receive gate money from Uluru and they benefit from the Mutijulu Foundation. There's plenty of work for anybody who is interested in making a bit of money. My wife and I have been associated with Mutijulu for 45 years and we know the people down there. And it was unfortunate that the 2 people he spoke to about Mutijulu really don't represent the traditional owners.
Tell us a little bit about the work that your wife Margaret and yourself have done in Mutijulu for the last 45 years. What puts you in a position to be able to have such an intimate knowledge of that community?
Oh, look, in 1972, with 12 men from Docker River, we built the first shop and service station and the first aircraft refuelling set up. Prior to the establishment of Mutijulu community, those people lived at either Arionga, Docker River or Amata. We started work at Amata in 1964. A lot of the middle-aged people at Mutijulu now, Margaret would have delivered as infants. And whenever we go back, the people just welcome Margaret with open arms. They just remember those early days. One of the traditional owners down there, Malia Time, worked with me at Amata, Docker River, and he was one of our leading men in the construction of the first Unity store. So there are some wonderful people there. But it's just so sad that people aren't acknowledged the way they should be.
Have you followed up with John Pilger or any of the people in the film about your concerns?
Yes, I have written to John Altman. He replied asking if he could pass on my email to John Pilger. That was a week ago and I haven't heard anything from Mr. Pilger since then.
As you just heard, John Pilger is adamant that he did spend enough time in the centre researching the film. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. And that's the problem. He talks about people parachuting in. That's precisely what he did. Reports that have been written about matters like child sexual abuse. There was a Mulligan inquiry in the APY lands in South Australia that refers to some horrific incidents down there over 3 years between 2005 and 2008. He mentions in the report about sexual favours in return for sniffable petrol. Now, this is fortunately minimal due to the rollout of Opal Fuel. But when Greg Andrews made his claims on Lateline, petrol sniffing was still rife at Murridulu. The behaviour there would be no different to that at an APY community only 90 kilometres south of Murridulu. Obviously, John Pilger didn't read that before he made the film, and it was just so unfortunate that he seemed to gloss over that.
Well, it could be that he did read it, but he didn't think he needed it for this film and the particular angle that he wanted to get across in this film.
Yes, but the evidence is there, and this is all part of the problem. Another big issue there is the amount of abuse that we're seeing because of pornographic and violent DVDs. 3 years ago, I was doing maintenance in houses in a community where I just refused to go into a house where these videos were being played, and the volume was so loud to be quite uncomfortable in the rest of the house. And in the middle of the day, there were up to 15 or 20 people sitting in a darkened room on mattresses watching these videos.
With children in the room?
Kids who should have been at school. And in fact, I challenged a parent about some of these kids, and they said, oh, they don't have to go to school. And I said, why? And they said, because they're visiting the community. They were from another community, and the parents believed that they didn't have to attend school.
It's not just Pilger speaking in this film. He does interview remote GPs, health workers, community leaders like Rosalie Kernoth-Monks, respected anthropologist John Altman from the Australian National University as well. Do you accept their interpretation of events?
Well, I just think it was so sad that people like John Altman, with his experience, that he didn't at least suggest to John Pilger that he speak to people in Central Australia who have that background and knowledge.
It'd be interesting to see if any of those people were approached but declined to take part. John Pilger was also critical of the town, Alice Springs.
I'm reminded of my reporting from apartheid South Africa. Yes, it's different. There aren't the signs, but there are two different Australias, two different services, almost two different sets of attitudes.
John Pilger talking about Alice Springs. Now, later in that interview, he did clarify that he agrees that there are lots of people in the centre that do care, but how does it make you feel to hear Alice Springs being talked about in this way by someone like John Pilger?
Oh, look, I think it's most unfortunate. I think in the interview he made reference to what he called the Aboriginal industry. He's got to remember that he's part of that industry. You know, obviously he's made part of his income from his work amongst Aboriginal people, and it's totally unfair to criticise these people who are working in the Aboriginal industry, and they're doing some fine work.
What would you like to happen? Obviously, you've written your letter, which is great. What would you ultimately, would you like John Pilger to come back and to spend more time here and to put out another film that you feel more represents what is actually going on here?
Yes, I'd like to see him come back and speak to a few more people around town. There have been some interesting comments online in the last week from people around Alice Springs, like Dave Price, who has had years of experience. It was interesting to hear his comments. John Pilger should talk to people like him.
Well, it's certainly interesting. Maybe there will be a Utopia Part 2.